Hello everyone, welcome to the Light World Podcast, and I'm your host, LT World, and on this channel we talk about the things people don't like to talk about. We talk about politics, we talk about religion, and we talk about ideologies. If that sounds like something you're into, join us as we take a look at the things that drive culture.
Do you really despise religious belief?
I despise people whose belief in religion is so firm it justifies killing people.
Inside, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult had taken their own lives.
Once in a while I get people that really claim they don't believe in evolution. And my response generally is, why not?
We can't even begin to describe a living creature in anything resembling precise terms.
Where do the laws of physics come from?
It's a question that doesn't work for me on multiple levels of analysis.
Does God exist?
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day.
The cosmological argument has been an argument that's been around for centuries, and it's been used to defend the existence of God for a long time now. But what exactly is this cosmological argument? Well, there has been multiple different forms of the cosmological argument. Just to name a few, there's been a couple suggested by Aquinas. There's been one proposed, one of the most common ones proposed by the Kalam school of thought, which was a Muslim school of thought back in the medieval times. So the cosmological argument has been around for a long time and has been proposed in different ways, but we're going to be focusing on one of the most common ways it's used, and that is actually the Kalam version of it, which goes like this with three points. 1. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2. The universe began to exist. 3. Therefore, the universe has a cause. So that is the common argument that is proposed in regards to the cosmological argument, especially in defense of either Christianity, Islam, monotheism of some sorts, anything like that is typically used as a defense for God. However, what were some of the things that were discussed? What were some of the postulated theories before the Big Bang? So, as we all know, the Big Bang theory is the most common way that people explain or believe the world started, especially within the scientific community. Now, even this is regardless of how people view the religion. A lot of times people will say at least some form of the Big Bang, whether that be by God just speaking it into existence, or whether that be from natural causes, as forms of atheism would say. The Big Bang has been the most common theory, especially within the scientific and academic world, to explain the beginning. But what were some defenses against the cosmological argument before the Big Bang? Well, a lot of people used to believe that the universe was eternal. And this included some Greek philosophers, such as Heraclitus, I'm probably saying that name wrong, who was noted for believing in an eternal universe. You also even had Einstein, who I don't know if he believed exactly in an eternal universe, but when he came up with his theory of general relativity, he tried to introduce a fudge factor to maintain that the universe was static, that it was staying within some sort of constant state and it wasn't expanding, because expansion meant that there could have been a beginning and it could introduce a lot of things. He didn't want that. He let bias get into the way of his work. But eventually the fudge factor was removed and people just recognized the general relativity. And eventually the Big Bang theory was actually more supported by other scientists. So in 1931, you had Georges Lemaitre in 1931 who formalized what we call the Big Bang theory, which then be supported. Well, I mean, Einstein came up with this theory of general relativity before this, but would be supported by the idea of general relativity and the equation that goes into that. It would also be supported by future scientists such as Stephen Hawking, who is one of the most prevalent and well-known when it comes to the Big Bang, through his studies and through his equations, and as well as just simple observations made by astronomers of watching the cosmos expand, basically, as galaxies and stars move farther away, or as they study the laws of thermodynamics and all these different things that play into it. And the fact that energy is reducing, and well, I mean, I forget how exactly it works, but the law of thermodynamics when it comes to heat and energy depleting, basically, or diffusing, as it will. So there's these different studies that came in that basically just propped up and supported the Big Bang Theory. So as far as science goes, we have pretty good reason to believe that the universe had some sort of beginning. At some point, there was some sort of beginning, and that is normally called the Big Bang. So this also should, before we jump into talking about then the cosmological argument, the Big Bang, and so forth, this is also important to note that you can actually come to this sort of conclusion philosophically. And I'm going to actually pull an excerpt from someone who's probably much smarter than me, by a man named Vince Vitale, who is a philosopher who graduated from Princeton with an undergrad in philosophy and religious studies, and eventually got his graduate in philosophy and religious studies from Oxford. And here's the quote that he uses to describe philosophically why you can come to the understanding that the universe has some sort of beginning. There's a philosophical reason to think that actually, this is a quote from Vince Vitale, there is a philosophical reason to think that actually infinite number of things or moments is not possible. Take a beginningless universe. The claim is that an infinite amount of time has already occurred before the present moment. But how could the universe run out? However many moments have been traversed, there would always be an infinite number more required to get to the present moment. So if the universe was beginningless, we never could have gotten to this moment, and therefore the fact that we have gotten to this moment implies that the universe must have had a beginning. So his whole point here is, to break it down a little bit, is that if the universe was eternal, and that time was eternal, space was eternal, matter was eternal, we would never get to the present moment. We are able to get to the present moment and experience it because there was a beginning. The reason being, there would have to be an infinite amount of time before the present moment, and by according to infinity, the fact that it never ends, we would never actually be able to get to the present moment. The fact that we're experiencing present moment, the fact that we're experiencing time itself, implies that there's some sort of beginning, that time had beginning, and that this matter that we are standing on, that we call Earth, has some sort of beginning, and so forth and so on with the universe. So we can come to a good idea and a good conclusion when it comes to the origins of the universe, that there had to be some sort of beginning from a philosophical standpoint as well. However, does this mean then, if the universe has a beginning, that God must exist? Well, not everyone thinks so. So that is the kind of the argument then. The question is, what caused the universe, or what caused the Big Bang? Now, some people try to use the Big Bang as its in of itself as an explanation for the universe being started. If you talk to some naturalists or some atheists, normally people outside of the scientific community, or people who may have just grown up without religion and they just think the Big Bang itself answers the question, normally they're mistaken. And the reason being is because the Big Bang doesn't really explain how the Big Bang occurred. It simply explains what happened when matter rapidly expanded. So as NASA explains what the Big Bang is, they define it like this. And now, this is pulling from a NASA resource that is designed for school-age children to learn about the Big Bang. So they use simple terms, and I picked this on purpose because I think it might be helpful to audience who don't have majors in science to just simply hear how someone breaks it down for school-age children to learn about it. So this is how NASA defines the Big Bang. The Big Bang is how astronomers explain the way the universe began. It is the idea that the universe began at just a single point, then expanded and stretched to grow as large as it is right now, and is still stretching or still growing. So the Big Bang is simply the theory that from a single point, the universe rapidly expanded until it cooled down and reached some sort of equilibrium. And then there's still expansion going on, but it was able to cool down, in a sense, with the lack of a better term, to sustain some sort of life and sustain some sort of equilibrium. Now, this doesn't really explain anything. So, for instance, if time had to be created, at the very least, time had to be created because we're experiencing the present moment, as Vince Vitale said. So, if time had to be created, well, there at least had to be something had to be created from that. Now, time, as we best understand it, and how I can best understand it from what I've looked at, is also somewhat dependent on space and matter and the relationships within the universe. It's not a solely independent thing in of itself. So that would mean that if time had to be created, matter most likely had to be created, and matter had to be created most likely in space, and all these different things had to be created, which would be this single point, rapid expansion. But where did that matter come from? Where did that time come from? Where did it come from? What was the cause of this single point? What created the single point? That's basically what it is. I can tell you that there was a rapid expansion, but I never told you where the matter and the energy and all that stuff came from in the first place. I'm just simply telling you what happened to expand the universe. I didn't tell you how the Big Bang actually started or what created the matter in the first place. Just listen to what NASA says further on within their description. This is NASA speaking. When the universe began, it was just hot, tiny particles mixed with light and energy. It was nothing like what we see now. As everything expanded and took up more space, it cooled down. The tiny particles grouped together, they formed atoms. Then those atoms grouped together. Over lots of time, atoms came together to form stars and galaxies. The first stars created bigger atoms and groups of atoms that led to more stars being born. At the same time, galaxies were crashing and grouping together as new stars were being born and dying. Then things like asteroids, comets, planets, and black holes formed. The question is, where did these atoms come from? Where did the particles to make the atoms come from? What created those? What created that single point? So the Big Bang in of itself doesn't really answer the question, how did the Big Bang start? It doesn't answer the question, where did the matter and energy come? Or where did the single point, what created the single point of existence? What created time and all these things? It doesn't really answer anything that's necessary. It just simply says that the universe expands. That's all it's saying. But there have been a couple proposals of how the Big Bang was started, or what caused the Big Bang, what caused the actual single point to then eventually expand and create the universe. There have been some proposals. One of the most common, I'm only going to quote a couple, mainly because if I would go down all the theories, we'd be here, one, for a long time. Two, all these theories are being debated within the scientific community. There is actually no consensus of what happened because no one knows. And three, a lot of these theories have even more nuanced theories within those theories that fall under these headers that other astronomers have created. So we'd be here for a while. And when I looked at research and stuff, like, there's just tons of different theories that are out there. We don't have time to cover every single one and cover each one. But we're just going to cover a couple topics that are typically brought up, and normally the problems that arise within them. But I would definitely suggest, I'll probably drop a couple links in description below to people who are much smarter when it comes to the scientific side of things. I enjoy the philosophy side of things. Scientific side of things is a little bit out of my ballpark, but I like to listen to people who are smarter than me when it comes to these things. And I'm going to drop some links for you to hear those people out. But one of the things is quantum physics. Quantum physics is often brought up mainly because of the spontaneous and randomness that seems to be in the quantum world. So I've listened to a couple of quantum physicists on podcasts explaining the quantum realm, and I've read and listened to a couple things on it. Granted, I haven't studied it much, so it's kind of a little bit out of my ballpark, but by what I can best understand, the reason why there is this idea that the quantum realm may be able to help explain why the Big Bang was able to occur or where the single point came from is because there seems to be some sort of randomness when it comes to quantum realm. Things seem to blip in and out of existence, things seem to move without really anything to cause it, and there seems to be a lot of randomness and just non-causals within the quantum realm. And therefore, some people have proposed that maybe the quantum realm proves that we don't need cause and effect. Maybe cause and effect is just a something that we only experience with outside of the quantum realm, but within the quantum realm we don't need cause and effect. That doesn't exist. Now, there's a few flaws with this. One being, just because we don't know what the cause is of something doesn't mean there isn't a cause at all. That would be very similarly. We used to mock people. I mean, at least I've heard mockery of ancient civilizations that would say, oh, lightning came from heaven, the gods must have caused it, or this came from the heavens, the gods must have caused it. And normally that's used with mockery, and people laugh at that, especially within naturalistic or scientific communities, because it's like, why would you automatically assume that? And very similarly, we can apply a similar logic if we want to be somewhat consistent, apply that to the quantum realm, being like, just because we don't know the cause, we can't just say, we can't just invoke saying that, no, there's no cause whatsoever. There's most likely is a cause, we just don't know what it is. And I could also make an argument easily using that sort of logic that if you're going to say, well, maybe cause and effect doesn't apply, I would have better evidence to say cause and effect applies to everything else. It should apply to the quantum realm. And if there is no observable cause within the physical realm to explain why there is a quantum realm, this might be actually an indicator that God is actually controlling the quantum realm, which is one of the basics and fundamentals of the matter that exists within the universe. So I could easily propose and use the fact that we don't have a good cause for the quantum realm to say that God actually is in control of the quantum realm, or God's creating the matter within the quantum realm, or that God is the cause. So it doesn't really get yourself out of the problem from that standpoint. It just simply doesn't really explain anything. So just because we don't know there's a cause doesn't mean there isn't a cause. And if there isn't any cause that we can explore, and for let's just say hundreds and thousands of years, no one can discover any sort of cause for the quantum realm within the physical world, that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't a God. That actually might mean that that's exactly how God creates and controls and keeps the world on track. So anyway, that doesn't disprove anything or prove anything. Secondly, the other issue with this is that other quantum physicists, I was listening to a podcast on this, the way that quantum physics is studied can also affect this randomness that they experience. So, for instance, the microscopes and the things that are used to study the quantum realm and the type of ways that they try to observe the quantum realm. I'm not wholly familiar with exactly how this all works in the technicalities, but according to the experts and the people who actually do work in these fields that I've listened to, the way that they observe these things can actually influence the quantum realm potentially. They don't know if how they're observing the quantum realm is actually influencing what the randomness that they're observing. So the techniques that they use to observe the quantum realm may be actual factors that influence how the quantum realm moves and how the quantum realm works. So there's actually no one really knows for sure exactly how all the quantum realm works, because the third thing, it's a really new field of study. It's relatively new. I mean, it's been around for a decent amount of time now, but it's still relatively new. It's still being pioneered, basically. So there's still a lot to learn. There's still a lot of things going on, and there's still a lot of things we just don't know. So the quantum realm doesn't really answer the question, at least not yet, at the very least. So the quantum realm isn't necessarily the best, and it has a few flaws right now, as stated. Now, another popular theory that I often hear. Now, I have talked to different people about the Big Bang Theory, and normally it either goes back to the quantum realm or the multiverse. That's the other one I hear about. There are a couple others. String theory is similar to the multiverse, so string theory and multiverse kind of go hand in hand to a certain extent. There's differences and nuances, but there's still a similar idea. Stephen Hawking proposed sort of the string theory idea, and he also talked about the multiverse theory as well. And there have been different subsets of these types of theories, string theory and multiverse. And these make up a large portion of what we will understand to be the causes of the Big Bang within some of the secular world. But these are the two main ones I heard, and this is why I covered these two. So the multiverse theory basically goes like this. There are an infinite amount or a high number of universes out there, and they're constantly basically having a bunch of Big Bangs and a bunch of single central points that are rapidly expanding and deflating and all these different things that eventually, with time, the possibility of one of the Big Bangs being successful is bound to occur. That sort of idea. And I'm going to read a quote from Stephen Hawking, who kind of talks about this a little bit. So the usual theory of eternal inflation, which the multiverse theory can also be called as he says, eternal inflation. So that's what he's talking about. The usual theory of eternal inflation predicts that globally our universe is like an infinite fractal with a mosaic of different pocket universes separated by an inflating ocean, said Hawking in an interview last autumn. The local laws of physics and chemistry can differ from one pocket universe to another, which together would form a multiverse. But I have never been a fan of the multiverse. If the scale of different universes in the multiverse is large or infinite, the theory can't be tested. So Stephen Hawking would go on to basically nuance the multiverse theory. He would also kind of talk about string theory and stuff like that. Mainly because, by what I could best tell, the reason why he liked those theories a little bit more is because his main problem with the multiverse theory, which is that it lacked testability. And that's one of the flaws of a lot of these theories in general, is that the multiverse theory, even string theory to a certain extent, and some other theories, they are hard to test or impossible to test, or at the current moment are impossible to test, at the very least. So a lot of these theories are just basically almost impossible to test. And no one really knows for sure. That's why there's so much debate within astronomers, quantum realm, and all that stuff, between atheists and theists and all these things, both scientists. There's a lot of this debate about these topics because it's just so hard to test them. We don't right now have the technology and the ability to test all these things. And so the testability is a big factor that plays into one of the flaws or issues with this theory, the multiverse theory, string theory, and theories like it. It's just difficult to test. And also, it doesn't really answer the question as of, A, where did matter come from? How are these big bangs happening? Just because you create more universes doesn't mean you created me a solution to the original problem. How is the big bang occurring? It just means that you've created more universes and more big bangs that need just more answers of how they're occurring. And if there is some sort of eternal universe outside, or eternal universe, eternal space, eternal cosmos, or whatever, outside of our universe, then the question is, how is that eternal universe with matter and time and other things operating? And even if that, as Stephen Hawking says, that these different universes within the multiverse itself have different laws of physics and so forth and so on, differences may range from time moves faster or slower, the matter may look different, there may be more atoms or less atoms, whatever, but it doesn't necessarily get rid of the root problem of, but how were these things still created? It still leaves us with a lot of questions that, with our original questions that haven't really been answered. You just create more universes and more problems. And there have been different physicists and stuff who talked about this, who mentioned the idea, most of these being theists, not necessarily Christians or Muslims or anything, just some form of deist or theist, who propose that this is sort of an issue that a lot of times cosmological and multiverse type of arguments fall in under, is that they just fall out of the realm of testability. They just push the problem off to something else outside of the Big Bang, which still hasn't answered the actual root question. And they still propose just new questions normally is what just happens. So there's just a couple of flaws, a couple things when it comes down to the causes of the universe from a purely secular standpoint. And again, as I said, there's more theories out there. And there's definitely people out there who know from a scientific standpoint a lot more about these topics. Atheists, Christians, Muslims of scientific and rigorous backgrounds who have much more interest in these things and know much more. I'm going to try to link a couple things that I used, a couple things that I think would be helpful in the description below when it comes to the scientific side and the cosmological. And I'll try to link a couple different angles of it. So yeah, but that's just a overview, a quick overview of what I've learned and what I studied and kind of the flaws that have been brought up by the research I saw. But there's many more theories out there, and a lot of them just basically tentatively pull together different pieces of evidence to try to form some sort of coherent idea of how this may have happened. But no one knows for sure how the Big Bang was caused, which leaves us to the question, does God exist? Does this mean God exists? I mean, as it stands, there doesn't seem to be a definitive answer to the question of the Big Bang and what caused the Big Bang. And using terms like the Big Bang was a cluster or a single point of matter and energy that rapidly expanded until things cooled down just begs the question, where did all this stuff come from for that to happen? If matter is eternal, how did it wind up getting stuck in time? If the universe is eternal, we wouldn't be in the present. So, there's just a lot of questions that arise that demand some sort of cause for the Big Bang to happen. And so far, the theories that have been proposed from a purely atheistic standpoint haven't been able to be rigorously tested or flawed, or just don't really answer the root of the question. So, as it stands, God being a eternal being that's able to create and has all power would be at least a plausible answer, or at least as plausible of a theory as these other theories that are proposed at the very least. So, God stands to be the possible cause to all of this and stands to be a good option when it comes to the theories presented for why there's the Big Bang or why there's a universe in the first place. So God is very much in the picture, still in it, and the cosmological argument is a very popular argument from theists because of this reason. It gets you to the first step of there could definitely be a God, and if there needs to be a cause to the universe, and God can definitely be that cause. So that's where the cosmological argument stands, and that's as far as it gets us. It doesn't get you much farther than that. So thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed what you hear. If you enjoyed what you hear, definitely leave a comment, like the video, leave a review on the podcast that you're listening to. And just hopefully you guys keep coming back and learn more about this current world of ours and all the things we're doing. So thank you guys for listening. And friends, just go out there and light the world. If you would like to learn more about how to light the world, subscribe to whatever podcast platform you're listening to and follow along, because we would love to have you, and we continue to cover topics like this down the road, and you can grow in your understanding and in your knowledge of these different important topics that we deal with every day. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. On these outlets, I ask questions, I run polls, people can DM me, and I'm going to do some more special content on there anyway. So definitely follow along there and join the Like the World community. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like video content, and I post some extra videos on there occasionally. So follow along, join the community, and we're going to have a good time learning more about the important topics of life.